Good evening and welcome back to my YouTube channel, Defining Virtuosity. I'm Odin Rathnam, Professor of Violin at Cleveland State University. And tonight we continue our traversal of books 1 and 2 of the Wohlfahrt etudes with number 13 marked Moderato. In this particular etude, I like to begin by focusing again on the left hand rhythm and freedom. So that we don't alter it when we add in the point of the etude, which is to be able to do fast 16th notes leading into a longer note at the points of the bow, at the very tip and the very frog. At the very tip of the bow, I try to involve my elbow more in the stroke, feeling the out and inward motion of the arm and really using that joint actively. At the frog of the bow, more involvement of the small muscles of the wrists and fingers to help, so that I don't try to use the elbow or the shoulder as much at that part of the bow. Even at the tip, I actually encourage students to engage their fingers. But before we get into the problems of the right hand, we want to make sure that the left hand is comfortable and able to execute all of the actions without any unnecessary tension. One of the challenges of the left hand is to have 4 fast notes that could be a combination of lifts, drops, and string crossings to an immediately free vibrato on a long note. That long note is going to have slow bow speed because we have to hold the note for 3 full quarter note values. So the bowing pattern for this that you can practice separately is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, release, 2, 3, release, on all 4 strings. You can also practice ending the long note on a new string. That is a good fundamental exercise to practice. You can also practice it on the 3 planes, GD, DA, and AE, to get very comfortable going from the extreme point of frog of the bow and isolate those 4 notes and really feel in, out, in, out. Here, keep the bow straight. Watch the sounding point like a hawk on those 4 notes. That you're maintaining 90 degrees to the string, despite all of the hinge work that you're doing in the hand. The left hand work, what precedes putting the 2 together, is making sure that we get from the 4/16 to the long dotted quarter without tension in the vibrato on the long dotted quarter. So my whole focus is freedom here. And that's why I've altered the bowing that way. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. What that does is, because I've slurred them together and I'm not doing them separately, I'm less likely to lurch in the vibrato pattern of the long note, the dotted half. If we jerk the arm, yam, because we think there's emphasis, it actually is counterproductive. We can do that in the bow if we wanted to accent the long note. But actually what's happening is faster bow speed, slow, faster bow speed, slow, release, faster, slow, faster, slow. And we want to maintain that idea of slow, fast, slow, first practice this study with the chord. Now, one thing I want to bring up here is that, again, in the Schirmer edition, there are some antiquated fingerings that don't train some of the skills I believe are necessary in modern technique. I really want to train young artists' fourth fingers very early. If the dotted half notes fall on an open string, I would suggest replacing that for study purposes only with a fourth finger. I don't mind as much having the open strings fall on a 16th note, a semiquaver, but if it's a long note, that's a good opportunity to practice the concept of having four notes leading to a fourth finger and having the fourth finger vibrato not tighten the arm. In the beginning, the student may feel tension in the front aspects of the shoulder here if they're initiating the vibrato from the incorrect point. So when we practice these, just for intents of discussion and referring you back to my study on conditions of conditions for creating a true impulse vibrato, we can take the shoulder rest away and focus on the balance of the fiddle in the collarbone. And if we're playing four fast 16th notes leading into a fourth finger, you want to make sure that when that fourth finger falls, you resist this temptation on the drop of the four, and that you somehow have an angle that allows for the freedom of the vibrato pattern. I don't mind as much if there's firm pressure between the chin and collarbone at that point. But some of the conditions that will allow you to vibrate that fourth finger are making sure that the hand is rotated enough. And again, what I mean is not to quote Robin Williams when he imitates us Indians saying, screw in the light bulb, screw in the light bulb. But yeah, screw in the light bulb, turn the hand this way so that your palm is a little more parallel with the neck of the instrument, and replace the over rotation of the shoulder with that turning of the forearm, and it releases the inside of the index finger away from the E string. And if you then feel collapsible first joints in the center of gravity behind the first joint of the fingertips, the vibrato will almost happen by itself. I'm keeping that space consciously. So whether you use a shoulder rest or not, I would strongly suggest taking your shoulder rest away, because if the shoulder rest is there, and if you have that habit of tightening up in the fourth finger when you apply the fourth finger vibrato, you're not using your shoulder rest as a shoulder rest, but as a shoulder work, which I tell my students not to do. So rather than being a tyrant about whether or not to use a shoulder rest, there's my 2 cents on that. Once you've mastered that, you want to put the two hands together and perform the study as printed. It's marked forte, and I would take that with a grain of salt just to calm ourselves down and be very Yoda-like, as I've said so many times before. end your phrase as always. You can use the open there. I don't mind that. Or fourth finger here, fourth finger here, and fourth finger on the open D here. You can always later play open D with a vibrated third finger. But if we're going to learn the ability to vibrate every note, even if we might not always do that in music, having that ability and training it early is so important. To be able to vibrate every note and play in tune is just, for me, absolute most important two things. Then you could decide later deliberately whether to vibrate less or more on a note or not at all, and that's fine. But not doing it because you can't control your vibrato patterns or your hand is a no-no, big no-no. So then you go through the whole study that way. And again, I'm thinking of incorporating the fingers a little bit here at the frog to help. Because this motion is not very big. And if I try to generate it entirely from the elbow or the shoulder, I'm going to get into trouble. But if I use the fingers, and I remember this notion of keeping the bow in a straight line in front of me, whether I'm pulling or pushing the sound out, that air stays like that. You can just keep trying to do this with your arm. It's a great exercise. Straight line. It feels very much like the E string. This line of the arm, yeah? So when you play the E string, it feels very, very similar to just drawing the bow straight in front of your face, like this, down. And if the fiddle is not too far out to the left or the right, but the shoulder is, well, your collarbone is open, so you feel like you're open, like that. That feels very good for bowing on the E string. Then change your planes this way until you're finally on the G string. And if you look at the old books on Franco-Belgian technique, as taught by Cesar Thompson and some of the other icons of the 19th century Franco-Belgian school, in the treatises of that time, the bow was supposed to be flat over the floor on the G string, literally, flat over the floor. And most people are like this when they play on the G string, flat over the floor. And what will help that is curling the fingers, especially the third and the pinky, and having the wrist slightly higher than the elbow. If the G string at that point is also flat over the floor, you can see the chin rest has to be beneath the scroll. That's why Mr. Galamian wanted all of his students to keep the fiddle well up. It's why Heifetz has the fiddle well up, and Schering has the fiddle well up, and Stern has the fiddle well up. So while you may see Galamian students breaking that rule, breaking that rule comes after years of really keeping it up at a good height, you know. It can all be put through the filters of comfort and result and applied in percentages, but it has to be there. So there you have it. That's Wohlfahrt study number 13. A very tricky one, and well worth considerable practice and study. I hope this helps you. If you enjoyed it, or if you have questions, please comment, like and share, and subscribe to my channel. I'd like to keep growing it, and thank you for listening.